Greetings and good afternoon, good evening, and good night. My name is Shekhinah B, and I want to introduce the entire team before we officially get started for the official creative chat. We are going to keep it all the way real today and every other day. I'd like to introduce on keys. This is my version of Ray Chu and the crew, right? So we have Mr. Winborne on keys. I know you can't clap if y'all holding a fork. It's okay. It's all right. We have my very dear good pal, Mr. Derek Smith on drums. We got the baby face on the side of me. Mr. Tim Ragsdale on bass. Vegetarian model extraordinaire. I'll be remiss if I did not say a super thanks to our people on the food. Petty Crocker, LLC, Cassandra, Lee Holloway, and Erica Dawn Glenn, my sisters. Even little Austin. Austin was helping. He was being good today. We have Alex on house management. We have my guy Styx making sure all the sound is sounding the way it's sounding. And we have Jason on videography. Make sure the filters are doing what it needs to be doing with my Makeup Forever filters and my lip pop straight out of Hairtown. Oh, Jason, we forgot the most important thing, right? Before we even introduce our guest panelists. I'd like to introduce a very important guest today. We didn't even know they're not even on the list, but I'd like to introduce my shoes. Make sure you get that. These are the Mermaid Couture exclusives. And no, honey, it's not Pee Wee Herman or Clodhoppers, okay? It's kind. And what's Creatives Chat? That was right on point. Give it up for everybody. Give it up for yourselves. So this is a pop-up curated discussion event infusing creative industry topics, best practices, a little bit of controversy, maybe a little bit more. And our guest panelists include artists and art enthusiasts who have made a significant impact in the creative ecosystem. So our guest panelists, I want to introduce to you the following very amazing people in the community that are doing great things and that will give a lot of context and value and just the meat and the vegetables of the conversation. I'd like to introduce to you Miss Alia Sutton-Bey. Please come on down. I'd also like to introduce Mr. Ashley Scott, celebrity extraordinaire himself. And I'd like to introduce Ken Metzner, attorney at law. He's got my back, so no one can sue me today. So I'm gonna break it down with everybody. Right now, I started with Miss Alia. Miss Alia is the owner and the principal consultant of Sutton-Bey LLC and the co-founder for the African Diaspora Arts Collective Incorporated. Miss Alia has been and yes, I affectionately call her Miss Alia because she was my former professor, former educator and instructor to the community. She's been involved in the cultural arts space in Philadelphia for well over 30 years, even though she's 25. First as a performer and later as a curator of cultural arts festivals and programs. So a lot of events that are taking place in Philadelphia, Miss Alia's had her hand in, as well as a lot of people she has managed to touch lives like myself that have inspired me to do many of the great things that I'm doing today. So I really appreciate you being here. I just want to make sure that your mics are on. And like Prince says, our mics are always on. I'd also like to reintroduce Ashley Scott, the CEO of Flash Entertainment Group and Soulful Sounds International Records, an international recording artist and music event curator, a graduate of Howard University. He runs ashleyscottmusic.com. He also was a former governor and former vice president of the Philadelphia Chapter Recording Academy, a prestigious institution that has worked with artists all over the world. So yeah, we have Ken Metzner. I said it right? I said it right. Yeah, I know I said it right. A counselor, attorney at law, and advocate for creatives and arts and cultural organizations with over 25 years of experience at the intersection of law, business, and the arts, and the current executive director of PVLA, which stands for the Philadelphia Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. So please give a round of applause for my amazing panel and all of their excellence. We're going to talk about some topics that I have rocked Facebook and Twitter, not so much Twitter, but Facebook and Instagram by storm. And we're just going to dive right into it. We're going to talk about contracts, business privilege taxes, oh my. Where did this come about? I reached out to a venue that's local to Philadelphia, but yes, I reached out to a venue. I intended to do an ensemble event, a performing event for multiple artists. And when I reached out to that venue, I was given a contract, and the contract was looking a little funny. This is a multi-million-dollar franchise. And when I saw the contract said, initially, one, they're not paying you up front. You have to be paid based off of your ticket sales. And they're taking 30% in your ticket sales, 5% in an amusement tax, 0.27% in a business privilege tax, $400 in production, $400 in marketing, and that's before we receive your 1099 and get taxed by the I, the R, and the S. Again, that venue is City Winery. It just gave me a chill in my spirit, to my soul. So I just want to know your thoughts about something like that from a legal perspective. Obviously, these are contracts that are not unheard of, but it is a common thing. And I guess maybe I'm just the outlier who just decided that really didn't work for me this year. So please give context. Anyone? Ashley's looking like you have something to say.
I won't give context from a legal perspective, but I can give context as a cultural producer. Mm-hmm. So when you're engaging venues, there's two ways for an artist to get engaged. And your experience was definitely one way, and that's when an artist or a curator goes to an event and says, I want to have an event. Well, that's like a rental.
It is.
And so what they're doing is providing you with their cost up front, and you're going to absorb them. So that's one way. The second way is when they procure an artist. So I can guarantee you there's a different kind of contract, and it'll look different if City Winery calls you. So that experience is so for artists who want to do or engage venues that way, thinking about where your dollar's coming from, because they're going to, as a venue, I'm not going to absorb those costs.
Okay. Which I find absolutely perplexing. Mr. Scott, any context to that?
I think what's the best way to say it? It's an unfortunate time that we're in, within the industry. I mean, things are changing every millisecond. So practices are not what they used to be. As an artist, I guess with that said venue, it is a national chain. And so for those that want to not only get out of their own market, it's almost like once you get in one, you may get in another. Because people are doing city winery tours. Many artists that we know, whether it's an Eric Benet or I'm actually opening for Mickey Howard in Washington, D.C. coming up. So she's doing a city winery tour. So no matter where you are, I think right now that's the one that everyone seems to want to get in to kind of branch off and take their brand to other markets. Mm-hmm. So no deal is ever a good deal. I don't care whether it's a record deal or no deal is a great deal.
Oh, my face is showing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And some veterans have said to me, most contracts are made to be broken, unfortunately. But it happens. So I'm not saying what they gave, the deal that they're giving artists are great. I'm saying it's just what it is right now.
Okay, that's a perspective. Ken, want to weigh in?
I think yes to all of that I've heard. A contract is negotiable, right? Mm-hmm. It's rare that someone presents you with an offer and there's an immediate acceptance. There typically is back and forth, and a lot of the terms which might appear on their form to be non-negotiable or sort of standard are very often subject to revision based on the power dynamics, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're a well-established artist and they know that you are going to draw a certain audience, and for a venue that, like most venues, depends really on alcohol sales, right, to make its money, if you have a following that they perceive is going to be a large consuming crowd, you have a different kind of leverage with them. So a lot of it is very fact dependent. But what I say to artists is that you probably have more leverage than you think you have. And it can be very intimidating for artists to be presented with something that looks like a pre-printed form contract, right? It's all typed up with just some blanks for your name and your signature. And it appears as if, well, that's just what it is. Sign here. It can be intimidating for artists to push back and say, well, wait a second, this doesn't seem fair. Or this part seems expensive. Or what am I getting for my $400 of advertising money that you want me to contribute, or $400 toward production? What, am I at least getting like a run through, a sound check or something, right? Yeah, I understand that can be challenging, but I think everything is negotiable.
I totally agree with that, and I'm so glad that you brought that point up, because when I contacted the talent buyer, Helen, she told me this was the standard contract that everyone gets, and that there was no room, that's what she said, that there was no room for negotiation, and in fact, that was pretty much it. And I said, really? So you're gonna give, I meant to add this part about the contract. There was a 75-mile radius, 90-day, so 3-month window that you really couldn't promote within 75 miles within a 90-day period of agreeing to said contract. So in my mind, I know that that's a standard contract for perhaps like an Eric Benet, a celebrity that has a following and they want to drive the traffic there within that time frame. But when I think about the local artists, the Shekhinah Bs of the world, that probably wouldn't work ideally for me, because if my livelihood is contingent upon me playing throughout the year and I don't have a record label distributing, or I'm not touring, that could greatly impact my scope and visibility within that time frame. And they have the right to cancel in their contract if you do not meet the 50% minimum ticket sales. So if you are in the upstairs at the Loft, and we're talking the City Winery in Philadelphia, if you do not meet the 50% quota within that time frame, they can pull your show within days of the show. And I've seen several artists who have had their shows pulled. So regardless of whatever money you've invested in their mind, you're not a good investment. You can't get the seats. You can't get the people to buy the alcohol. You're not a valued potential partner. Therefore, we're just going to shut it down. And they say, we'll gently pull it, give you another date, and then we'll gently pull it if it happens again, and we'll just gently never call you again. And I've seen that. And I just said, you know who's most impacted? Independent BIPOC artists are the most impacted by this, especially in the city of Philadelphia. Number one, it took quite some time for me to even get a response back, because I guess maybe I didn't have 1,000 followers, 1 million followers on my social media, so I must not have been. But I was offered a contract, and I was offered a date, and I was offered an opportunity. but I didn't find it very opportune when I looked at what I would have to pay for the team, even if I sold out based on ticket sales. It just was not lucrative. I posted this experience on Facebook. I received a correspondence from one of the presidents in their company of the franchise, called me. Well, I am the great Shekhinah B, but he called me and he said, so what can we do to work this out? I said, well, I think this is an unfair practice that your entire franchise is doing to local artists in the city of Philadelphia. And I think you need to restructure your contracts to accommodate artists that may not have as much leverage or social capital, social influence. And he said, well, what contract did they send you? And I said, is there some other contract that's being sent out that I didn't know about? And he said, can you email me the contract? I said, you don't know what's going on in your company? So I emailed the contract, and when I got a call back, he said, you posted the contract on Facebook? Like, who the hell are you talking to? I said, I posted. It became, legally speaking, it became my property once it was sent to me, correct?
It's a little more complicated than that. But to my knowledge, there's no confidentiality provision in the contract, and therefore there's no obligation on you to keep it confidential. It's not a question of property, it's just a question of information.
Well, I was informed, and I informed others of the information that was informed to me. Therefore, once that information was relayed on the public platform, I thought this would be a great opportunity to negotiate a new deal. And then I was told, you cannot speak for all of the artists in the Philadelphia area, because we've been working with Philadelphia artists and everyone seems happy. I said, no, I don't know if everyone's happy based on the post. Please read the comments. And, I pulled back and I said, you know what? This is just not the situation. City Winery is just one example of a changing narrative on the lack of value for artists. This is just a new narrative. Any thoughts about that?
Several points. I think it goes also to institutions, right? Mm-hmm. What institutions have we established to insulate independent artists? What collectives have we created? Because going to a venue as an individual artist is much more difficult than saying XYZ nonprofit, for-profit organization is behind me, and we haven't done a good job to establish that. Now, my side, the cultural side, the African folklore side, we have. And I would encourage independent artists to think about, there's the artistry, right? There's the performing artist, but a lot of times we're missing conversations about the business of the art. And so what does it look like for independent artists to come together and form a collaborative? That collaborative then goes to the venue. Then you have more power because you have more voice. And they said it to you when they said, well, you don't speak. But if you were representing XYZ establishment, then you do speak for independent artists. So that's my thoughts in terms of, like, what's the actionable item here? Like, what can we do moving forward? And that would be for us to think about establishing some type of collaborative that can speak and
I'm
move.
so glad you said that. Let me clarify this. When I did reach out to City Winery, I was Shekhinah B of the Women's Coalition for Empowerment. So it wasn't like a Shekhinah B thing. It was more, we're trying to do an ensemble concert under the auspices of the Women's Coalition for Empowerment. So they were aware it was a institutional, which probably was one of the reasons why they eventually got back to me after I CC'd everyone, Jesus Christ, Buddha, SpongeBob, and all the staff. But eventually we did get a correspondence back. And you're right, there hasn't been a lot of collaborative go-to and seeking when approaching venues. Most artists are either doing it by themselves, or they may know someone who knows someone. Any advice, any thoughts behind changing this narrative to improve these conditions?
I would say having a strong team and, involved, and so that it's not the artist doing it. Because you have some cases like myself, and there are a few other independent artists like this, but you're looking at the artist, the record label, the manager, the social media person, the PR person, and all of that, and booking agent all in one. So having a team or having someone in your corner that can actually really negotiate that would be, best suited if you're not capable of doing that yourself.
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, it would be great to have a team, but I mean, as you know, a lot of emerging artists in particular don't have the resources to have that team on their side. So one of the things that we do at PVLA is advocacy. It's not just connecting artists with lawyers to represent them for free and offering legal advice and counseling and templates and things, but it's also advocacy. So this is the kind of issue advocating on behalf of local independent performing artists vis-a-vis a local presenter that I think is something that an organization like PVLA could take on, even if it weren't on behalf of a collective of artists. When you have a lawyer on your side, typically the dynamic changes, and it doesn't always change for the better, right?
Right.
I mean, this is another reason why sometimes I see artists not wanting to get a lawyer because they don't want to be perceived as that pain in the backside, right? That like, oh, every time, I want to present this artist, I have to talk to their lawyer. And right,
Well.
so some venues might not like that dynamic. But when you have sort of a nonprofit public interest law firm behind you, it's a different thing.
It is.
Because we've been here for 45 years, and God willing, we'll be here for another 45 years. So they know who we are, and PVLA advocates on behalf of the entire sector. So we do also have clients that are presenters.
Yeah.
Venues, museums, universities, so we're deeply embedded in the community, and that's the approach that we take. So I think, you have identified an area where we could look at, what particular provisions, not just of this one contract, right?
Right.
Because a lot of the
few.
venues have these, what I would call oppressive, grossly one-sided
Slavery
right
treaties.
provisions
Yeah.
in their contracts, and just to be able to have a conversation with the folks on the other side who are creating these forms.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about education, because to the point that you were making earlier, that 90-day exclusivity window might not be unacceptable to a group that is touring from
Right.
city to city to city. But it has a very different impact on people who are based locally and who perform mostly locally or regionally. They can't agree to that kind of exclusivity. And sometimes it's a function of educating the venue or the presenter about that, because they may not have those folks in mind when someone at the corporate office in New York is preparing their standard form.
I think that they have the leg up because they know the value. And so I would say to artists, when I walk into a room, I already know what my value proposition is. When you walk into the room, you have to know what your value proposition is. They know their value because they have the venue, they have the infrastructure. So when you go to negotiate your contract, you can clap back by saying, no, this is what I'm bringing to you, this is what I'm bringing to the table. That changes the power dynamic when you're bringing something to the table as well, and learning how to speak about that, especially when you're on your own. So yes, you're bringing this, but I'm going to bring this to your venue. And so, your value proposition is different for every individual, but hone into that and learn how to speak about that with confidence, so that when you go into these places and you have to negotiate and advocate for yourself, you can talk about what your value proposition is.
I think those are all great points. We are fighting against the current. And I say the current of artists who are okay with the status quo. Let's be very clear. We are in the city of Philadelphia. There are still people here doing $50 jobs. There are still people here doing jobs for sandwiches and wingettes. There are still venues that either don't pay, don't want to pay, adequately, and artists are okay because the optics versus actual profitable partnerships outweigh like what makes sense. And some artists, they'll say, hey, I'm gonna go here because it appears that my career is taking off, but financially it's just it's unproductive financially. It's not lucrative long term. You don't have any long-term collaborative relationships with said institution, so there are no guarantees on the back end for you making that sort of substantial investment of your time, energy, and talent. So now it's just, I have pictures and video that I just did this amazing show. I didn't get paid for it, but I was on the show. And it just like, oh, and then other artists is like, oh, wow, it raises your profile. And I'm just like, well, is it raising your pockets? Is it raising your credit score? Is it raising y'all credit score? Like, I just need to know. Don't laugh. I'm serious. It's just, some people like the perception of success versus actual success. And I guess I need to reintroduce myself to what success means for artists. In my mind, when I think of success for artists, outreach, impact, but income, that is comparable to the work being put out. Not you're talented, you're great, but the institution, it's like they have more value, and we're giving them the power to invalidate and, devalue the skill set and the talent. So now you're the outlier artist, and now everybody's like, oh, she's crazy because she wants to be treated like a human being, to be paid adequately. Everyone else is okay with it. I feel like I'm in zombie world when I tell people this. So I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Thoughts?
This has always been the machine. This is how the machine works. What are we talking about? I mean, we can look at artists of the past. This is why when I watch the biographies and I look at what James Brown did, James Brown took his own door. Like, go back and look at those artists that have successfully been able to do some things for themselves. James Brown said, well, wait a minute, I'm gonna cut out the middleman. Ray Charles said, I wanna own my masters. Okay, so again, what are we saying as artists? And think about, from a performing art, yeah, I wanted to be the next, Debbie Allen, right? Yeah. But that wasn't gonna happen for me. And so I work with an independent artist now who says, listen, he clears $75,000, $80,000 a year. He's probably halfway unknown amongst many people, but he works. And see, we don't look at that as success, but the average Joe Blow who can't sing, dance, or act roughly makes median income $125,000, $150,000, or maybe even a little less. That's median income. Okay. But if you're doing what you love and you're getting paid for it, does it matter if you're streaming it? Does it matter? You can go overseas. That's where I started, overseas. Yes. I mean, there's work, but you have to define, what is success, 1 million likes, or is success getting a $1,500 check when you leave at the end of the night? And is that adequate for you? Everybody's not going to be a millionaire.
Exactly.
I mean, but if you can make $80,000 singing and doing what you love, then that could be success for you. You have to define that for yourself.
Yeah, definitely I agree with success is what you deem it. And what James Brown did was definitely something truth to it. My professor at Howard University, his name was Webster Lewis, and musically he was conductor for Barry White's Love Unlimited Orchestra, and he produced a song called Here's Looking Up to You on an artist named Michael Wyckoff, which was later sampled by Jeanne for Hey Mr. DJ, just to give you a little brief biography. But he told us, he said, a record contract is nothing but a credit card. What they put out, you will pay back. And he told us to remain, he told all of us in class, he said, remain independent. He said, because this thing is changing. He said, I don't know what it's changing to, but it's changing. And just don't ever go after a major deal. And I've lived with that for all of my life, ever since he told me that. And I have my own label and I own my masters. So, and in terms of doing what you love, another quick history thing, my aunt is a member of the Philadelphia-based group known as the 3 Degrees, from the Sound of Philadelphia era, known for like When Will I See You Again. And her manager taught her at an early age and said, if you can entertain an audience, you can work for the rest of your life. And a hit record is just icing on the cake to create more work. So if you love performing and that's what you love to do, go ahead and do it, because she's still doing it, about to be 60 years in the game. So.
Okay. Good information. I didn't want to, throw it out there. I wanted you to do that. I didn't want to tell everybody we got, celebrity legacy sitting on the, get his autograph later, at the Chitlin Hoagie spot next year.
We're good.
I mean, I think these are all great points and great facts. It's just, when I think about another deal that was presented to me recently, this was after the City Winery debacle. There was an institution that is very notable in Philadelphia region. This institution offered a performance opportunity, and they said, we wanted performers from all walks of life. We heard that you were just talented. We found out that you may have some availability based on your calendar. And they said, Shekhinah, can you perform outside with no electricity, in the cold? It may even rain. And they said they was only gonna give me $350 to stand outside for 2 hours in the cold and the rain, and there was the money that I was supposed to get. I wasn't gonna get it for a few weeks. And this organization, they told me that I wasn't gonna get my money, but they grossing in revenues of upward about $500,000 and $600,000. And then I said, that's probably not going to work for me this year. I said, y'all can catch me February 31st, 2028, and I'll think about it at that time. That just wasn't going to work. But so many artists, they had a roster from the early onset of the end of the summer, from now through to December 31st. They offered that, and every single artist, and I'm looking, and I said, wow, they agreed to that? They wouldn't even give you electricity. And they said this organization, grossing hundreds of thousands of dollars, couldn't give me $350 on, they said, a few weeks. So that means probably about a month before you get the money. But you had to come out front, and you had to be outside for 2 hours. And you have to bring your own sound system, your own setup, your own musicians. They was like, well, you can sing a cappella. So I'll just be sitting there like, can y'all hear me? So I'd have been sitting out there samboing and soft shoeing for, and by the time the money may have gotten to me, because everybody know if you live in Philadelphia, if you get in your mail, good luck, okay? So good luck. But they were okay with that narrative. There wasn't a conversation. I said, well, is there more money in the coffer that we can offer to artists? I said, since you're not giving electricity, I mean, I do have equipment, but my equipment requires electricity. They said, oh, well, you can get the battery-operated versions. Oh, do y'all have any to rent, to provide, or give, or offer? No. But everybody was going for it. There is a long list, and that organization is the Avenue of the Arts Live. Street Performers Series, by the way. And when I asked a couple of artists that were a part of it, they said, well, we getting paid. I said, are you? I said, but are you? And everybody was okay with it. And I just felt like we're fighting against that. So when we talk about the negotiations, if I am a representative of a minority of people, individuals, institutions, curators, presenters, who will say no to that, but there is a majority of people who are content, seemingly, with the status quo, I'm the crazy person. So, Mrs. Scott? No, Dr. Scott?
I wouldn't say you're crazy.
I know I'm not crazy.
No, I wouldn't say you're crazy. That was just my only thought. Keep going.
So when I think about how it looks, and we've all been guilty, every artist, there is not an artist in here that haven't done it at least once in their life, done a low-paying gig. We've all done it because we've been told the narrative of paying dues, this paying dues narrative. We have been told those bill of goods, those bill of bads, for so long that now it seems to be culturalized and embedded in the thought process of pursuing the endeavor. So I found an alternative. I remember being hired by bands. This is why I got into the corporate sector, and I said, well, you know what? I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna look for gigs. I'm gonna go with a corporate unit. I'm gonna get anywhere from $300 and something to $1,000, however much it is, and I'm just gonna go that route. But then I'm still working for someone else. When they negotiate the deal and they get to dictate what kind of music I do, for me, I didn't love it anymore. I guess my ambitions were a little different. And I said, okay, well, let's do some quick math. There are 52 weeks in a year, right, everybody? There's 52 weeks in a year. I'm a singer. I mean, I do a little more than sing. I write books too, but I'm a singer. 52 weeks in a year. Let's assume I work every week for 52 weeks, once a week for 52 weeks. Let's say I get $350 a gig. Now, you know what? Let's make it even more interesting. Let's say I get $400. $400. You guys say $400. If I got $400, what's the average rent in Philadelphia, one-bedroom apartment? Let's just assume. What's that about? $1,200? $1,200. If I don't want rats opening the door for me, right? So think about $1,200. That's just rent. If I did 52 gigs at $400 each gig, that's $20,800. Now, that's before taxes. That's before medical. You can't get sick, Shekhinah. That's 52. That every single week of the year, I can't get sick. And that's $400. If every gig I did was and at the time when I started, I was like, oh, I'm making money. I'm making money. Until at the end of the year, and you're just like, wait a minute. I like to get my nails done, a colonic every now and then, my toes done. I like to get lasered in places that cost at least $250 a pop, I like to travel. I actually have utilities to pay for. I have to go places. I go to therapy. That costs money, even if it's covered by co-pays. If you get sick, medication. It's just so many things that I factored in. So this $20,800 is just not cutting it. It's not. And I said, okay, I still qualify for food stamps, so I can still get some food stamps, right? I can still get a little food stamp, probably get about maybe like $200 a month in food, But see, I shop at like Sprouts and Whole Foods and like Trader Joe's, and I don't go to Cousins where they have cats running around. So I buy a certain type of food. I like my water to be a certain type of water, All right, well, I could cut down some costs. I chop my hair off. My husband's my barber. Shout out to my husband in the audience. Eric, you could just say hi. I love you so much, honey. And he's also my personal trainer. But if I had to pay for these things, $20,800 before taxes is just not enough. It's just not enough. So I had to reframe the narrative. And I said, well, if I'm giving all of my time to the corporate unit, I'm not reserving time for me building into something that I want. And although it seemed like a shoo-in, an easy thing to do, it just wasn't worth it. So I had to sit back and I said, how can I really make the money? I had to rub my hands together like Mr. Burns and say, excellent, what can I do? So I started to say, I'm a creative cultural producer. And the conversations changed. Once I stopped saying that I was an artist, I started getting into doors and walking into different conversations. Granted, the City Winery didn't work out. I mean, they did offer me the contract. I just declined at the end of it because I just wasn't loving what. And sometimes you find you'll turn down deals. But when I started to enter into different conversations, I started sending proposals, right? The proposal narrative. And I said, well, we need an entire budget for this. We need this, and this. I have this many people. And then I started breaking in like a different tax bracket. And I said, oh, Y'all cutting down my food stamps? Hold up, what's going on? Wait a minute. But things kind of changed, and the narrative shifted because I started to get into the business of art rather just being just the artist. And I said, wow, I can make this a teachable thing and monetize this and still do good in my community, but I can create a salary, and I want to show other artists how to do the same. And I started getting into meetings with like the state and the municipalities, the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. I'm a multi-grant recipient. The Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, I'm a multi-grant recipient, and several others. I have sponsorship relationships. And then all of a sudden, people started calling me. Hey, Shekhinah, can you handle such and such? Hi, we're the Delaware River Waterfront Corporation. Can you just like run the whole like season? Well, do we have an adequate budget that's going to increase my yearly salary higher than $20,800? Please, we'll take care of that. Okay, well, thank you. And that's when things started to change. And then once I got into that relationship, then, hey, we have some friends over at Center City District. Can you creative, culturally produce? And well, I certainly can. And it shifted my thinking. And I'm not saying every artist needs to be a creative cultural producer, but perhaps the presentation on being just an artist and not someone in the business of art changes the narrative. So just my experiences and my thoughts. Thoughts?
I find everything that you just said at once inspiring and depressing. And because from where I sit, I think artists as artists deserve a living wage.
Absolutely.
And not every artist has the poise, the confidence, the presence that you have. And so it does take some collective action, to your point, to really help fortify and champion the folks who want to make a living just doing what they love and sharing their artistic magic in the world. And I think we can all do a better job of helping, to make that happen.
And that's literally what I wanted to do. Perhaps I need to learn some new ways of doing it, but even just digitally streaming, when I talk to artists about royalties, I want to share this with you guys. This is my digital streaming. You can close this up. You can close this up. The digital stream payout for artists, we've been told, and it seemed like a nice thing, hey, my music is on all platforms. You ever heard an artist say that? I'm on streaming. Anybody put your hands up if you heard somebody say, there's everybody pretty much. Okay. My art is on all the streaming platforms, all digital platforms, a payout. We have this thing every year on Spotify where Spotify will say, Spotify Wrapped. Anybody heard Spotify Wrapped? And at the conclusion of the year, you get to conclude all of the streams that you've had with your music for the year, and people are actually excited. See, I'm the crazy person that'll say, wow, what does that quantify in dollars and cents? And I'm not saying that success is directly connected to pay, but my livelihood is connected directly to pay, right? So I think about this. I think about, okay, let's look at Amazon. No, it was a fun one. What's the popular one? Spotify. Let's go with Spotify. 0.00500. So that's what, 500,000th, 100,000th of a penny when you stream it, right? If I stream a song 1,000 times, one song, that's $5. You can't even get a Happy Meal with that. You can't get a Happy Meal with that. You couldn't get an Izzy with that. You couldn't get, okay. But now let's see if I streamed the song, if the song was streamed 10,000 times, that's $50. What utility, well, I guess you could pay a water bill if you by yourself, right? No. If you catching rainwater outside or something like that. And you might have to get lie herp or something, but now, if we do 100,000 streams, just when people say they go viral, what does that mean? What's viral? 100,000 streams gets you $500. Do you know 100,000 streams is $500? That's before taxes. That's before your taxes. So when I think about what we've been taught, all you had to do was just be talented. All you had to do was just have access to the platforms. And they have to pay for premium accounts in order to get the type of visibility necessary. What is the marketing budget behind you trying to get these streams? And then after you put out the marketing, you paid for the studio time, you paid the musicians, the producers, mastering, pictures, teeth, all of that. 100,000 streams, $500. That's just one platform. Let's just, that's not enough to pay rent in Philadelphia unless you in a cardboard box on the side of the road. And I mean, this is where we are. So when I said, let's rethink this narrative, a lot of things that are popular aren't necessarily lucrative, much like in the instance of some of these places that, people will go and they'll say, hey, I can do, Eric Benet. I went to see Eric Benet. I find him to be a very talented man, and everybody knows Eric Benet, right? And he did a great show, and I remember walking in the first time that I ever been in the venue, and I said, wow, he sold out this show, wow. And then I said, I wonder how much money he has to pay out everyone. I looked at his band, I said, he got a small band. They ain't getting a lot of money. Then I said, wait a minute. He did charge like almost $100 for that premium seating, right? He had a hole under his shirt. And he had a hole under his shirt. And when he put his arm up and the shirt was talking, and I said, he had to fly out from California because he don't live on the East Coast, right? And he did 2 shows that day. So I said, let me do the math here. This before I even seen what their contract was. And I said, okay. So he paid them out, and he has to do multiple shows like this throughout the year. Fortunately for him, he's been on a level of influence and visibility to command the seats in the door to at least determine some sort of profit, right? But the average artist, that's why most of the artists, it's very rare that you see an artist that's local and independent do a show and be successful. I actually got the chance to see one. Tangeray Hayward, shout out to Tangeray Hayward. She was the last show that I saw at City Winery. She did a show recently. And yeah, give a hand to Tangeray. I know you home watching, sis. I see you. Shout out to you. She sold enough to have the show, almost 200 tickets on a Thursday night as an independent solo artist. Most artists in Philadelphia are doing ensemble shows to guarantee the seats and guarantee the date, or they'll have opening acts. It's not often that you see one person actually successful doing it. And I said, well, I wonder how many other people could actually do that. Not many. And even if they did, how often are you going to have, even if it's a lucrative payout at the end, how many times do you have to do that throughout the year for it to be profitable outside of maybe we doing a corporate band, maybe we do a couple of gigs here and there? So again, what is the money looking like at the end of the day? What's the money looking like? And when I say it and when I ask artists this, they give me the side eye and they're just like, well, that's just the way it is. Okay. Maybe we need to reevaluate how we're pursuing this endeavor, and maybe we need to not be as readily available. Maybe we need to come up with a new way. Then I was told, join the union. I was told by a few people to join the union. Ken, he's like, what did I get myself into? And when I was told to join the union, I said, maybe the union could represent and protect me from the unmitigated, terrible exploitation being faced by artists everywhere. And when I decided I'm gonna look into the unions, I decided to pull their bylaws. In the city of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia's Musician Union Local 77 American Federation of Musicians bylaws. By the way, Ken, this is legal because it was on their public website, so they can't sue me for this. I'm going to read Section 5, something that even members who are actively involved in this union didn't know. And they couldn't tell me because they liked the optics and the prestige of the union. But when I saw, and I studied, Section 5, all members are required to pay work dues based on earnings for all musical services performed in the amount of 3.5% of the local scale wages. That means every single job that you do, you've got to pay and report that back to the union. And that means you cannot technically take a job that's ununion, unauthorized, and you didn't have a right contract with the union. Because if you would, as we get back to the benediction, let me turn to the page, my brother. Continue on. Article 8, duties of the members. It shall be a violation of these bylaws for any member to provide services as a leader or a contractor, to perform as a single or an engagement not covered. I said it's not covered by the collective bargaining agreement between the local or the AFM, American Federation of Musicians, and the employer. In short, I'm trying to tell them what they trying to know. You will be directly in violation. And it's not overlord to knowingly perform any engagement not covered by the collective bargaining agreement of the union. To perform, to agree to perform, or to engage to perform, to think about performing, to perform to perform. The minimum compensation. Gotta catch my breath, y'all. By the local or the AFM. Wait, last page, let me read the section that I needed to tell you. To violate is to fail to comply with. You can be put out the union and they could charge you a maximum of $5,000 if you get caught by the... Shabbatne. But they can actually fine you within the union if you do not adhere to the rules of the union. You have to report every single earning and give 3.5% back to the union. And to fail to do so means you are in direct violation. Did y'all know that? And the union, so there's a lot of black artists that I know that are in this union. I need to take a drink. Just give me a second to be human for a second. I appreciate y'all following me on this journey. Yeah, you gotta put your hands like this when it's serious, right? What I learned is that the union, although meant to protect the wage scale and to keep a minimum requirement of wage for the earners, it's not what we all assumed it was. We thought, oh, if you join the union, they're gonna provide jobs. No, and the average jobs that are being marketed within the union, at least here locally, are for classical musicians. So when I think about black and brown artists who are marginalized and they're playing the kind of music that we play, they're not really thought about. So they're just paying dues and there's no work. And you can't technically work. So if I decided I wanted to work at Warm Daddies, for about $2 or something. I don't know. I don't know what they paying there. What, $400 for about 10 people or something like that? About that. What, a chicken wing, a sandwich? What they giving now? They giving coupons. But you know, if I were to say, hey, thanks for offering me this job, said venue, but I'm a part of the union and I require scale for me and all of my team. They're going to say good night and good luck, because you can't work here, because everybody else knows that this is our budget and our base salary is what we're offering. And no, you can't get free food. So, you know, so I said, well, you know how many artists I know that are actually a part of the unions? And they're working a lot of these jobs under the table. If the unions were to find out that they are working and not providing their 3% of all these wages earned, and I understand why they do it, because it's not a lot of money to begin with, but is the union lucrative for this population?
No, no, but the union is as good or as bad as its members. But I'm glad you brought up an equity issue, because this is not just an artist issue. This is a workforce issue. This is a national workforce issue as it relates to people of color, whether you're an artist or you're a cashier. It is a racially motivated reason why, do we even value our own art? They don't value it. Apparently the union doesn't value it. And you're right, the union is for classically trained folks. Even folk artists of color struggle in that same community who join the union. We don't value our own art. And the United States is the only country that really looks at art as business and not a part of a quality of life, everyday value. So even when you try to put a dollar sign on art, that kind of biases the conversation. Like, I don't want to pay, like for African dance. Why is it $20 for me to take an African dance class? Like, I can go in the village and learn it for free because it's a part of their everyday quality. So, I mean, it's just a bigger conversation. I don't think it can be like packaged up real neat, because workforce is an issue. Equity in workforce is an issue, again, from artists to cashiers. But in terms of the union, like you think about SAG, the actors union, yes, right? I started out as an artist as a child with no parental support. So I'm getting gigs on my own. Mm-hmm. And I get this gig at an equity stage. Now, there is only one African-American equity stage in the city of Philadelphia, and it is not Freedom Theater. Uh-huh. It is Bushfire Theater on 52nd Street. Most people don't know that.
No, I didn't.
So I get this gig with Bushfire. I'm 17 years old at the time. I was excited because I got paid scale.
Okay.
So I think it's a two-sided conversation about when you are in it. Now I didn't have to, everybody doesn't have to be union. Right. So let's be clear, everybody on the stage doesn't have to be union. Only a certain percentage of the actors on the stage have to be union, but everybody has to get paid at scale. So so it's a two-sided conversation in terms of what is your craft, mm-hmm, and how are you using your craft for employment. And so the union is beneficial. If you're a studio musician, you want to be union because somebody from the union is going to be at the studio session anyway. And when you put your instrument down, they're going to say, you want me to take that 3.5% out of your check, or you want to cash at me. So the union is going to get their money, anyway. So you have to think about your art. How are you putting forth your art? And how are you creating a space for your art? But the union is only as powerful. And remember, unions, yeah, are only as powerful as the members. So if we're not members of the union, mm-hmm, then the union's not doing anything to promote us as artists or promote our style of artistry. Classical right. people are very serious. The orchestra, how many people do the orchestra hire every year between the Pops and the Philadelphia Orchestra? And so thinking about joining the union depends on, what your art form is.
And that's a great point that you bring. I find that the union opportunities that exist are more long-term versus kind of like a one-off gig or a small intermittent opportunity. So if I'm, and keep in mind, let's talk about the classical trained musicians that are union a lot of them are staying in those jobs until they die. They're dying like the corpse is still on the flute. You know what I mean? Like the tails, they're like, oh no, I'm still alive. I ain't ready to leave. So they're able to like fully benefit once they get in the door. The sector of artists within the BIPOC community that's playing, I guess, non-classical music, the jobs are they're not as consistent. There isn't a lot of workforce development integrity because there is like, it's so saturated.
There is no artist workforce. Let's be real clear. Like, there is no artist workforce. I mean, when you think about it,
I would say there is. It just doesn't have integrity.
To be a part of the workforce is about generating dollars, right? I mean, workforce is a conversation that is on the top of everybody's tongue because we're talking about, when you talk about that $20,000, the first thing I thought was, do you know that's like deep poverty? That's not just poverty.
Yeah.
Like that's considered by the federal government deep poverty. And more Philadelphians live in deep poverty than you can begin to imagine. We're the poorest. There's a lot of things here, a lot of spokes in this wheel at play. Philadelphia is the largest, poorest city. So don't think of your artistry or being an artist or artist workforce in isolation, of what is happening in the bigger picture and the larger picture. Even when you talk about being a PCA recipient, that's because you established an entity. Entity, right? So there's the difference between an artist belonging to an entity versus an independent artist. It's no different than having a record deal or not having a record deal, and you're working for yourself. And it's no different than working for yourself as a consultant of anything, whether it's a financial or an accountant. It's the same thing. You have to pay your own tax. But these are the things that artists have to begin to learn. We don't know what we don't know.
That is so true. And I have to say, I placed a lot of blame on the institutions, on the venues, on the workforce. But there has to be onus on the individual artists. Artists have to start to take interest and initiative in those very factors, like taxation, having transparent financial transactions. Getting paid under the table is just not it. And long term, you're not paying into Social Security. Long term, you're not paying into Medicare. Long term, you're not really getting the benefits of having your deductions on the very expenses that you need to use anyway. So like the under the table money, it's just not where it's at. And I wish that artists would actually start to take initiative and start the art economic empowerment, like this book here. This book I don't know where it came from, but the Art Economic Empowerment Workbook, a book written by a really cool artist named Shekhinah B. Thank you. Oh, thank you. So this is a guide to entrepreneurship and successful project execution, and we go through the very principles and the steps. Got that on? Got that? Okay. We go through the very principles and steps how artists can effectively go through the administrative requirements needed to establish themselves as a corporate entity. You can now get on payroll, pay yourself. You can now buy a state insurance and have your insurances set up. And all of these things are investments, but it's a matter of what's my actual total budget for the year? What's my monthly budget? What's my yearly budget? And how much money do I project to make doing what I love, doing what I do well for the year? And if it's not going to cover the expenses that I aforementioned, then there's nothing wrong with working your job until the talent of your passion exceeds the income associated with your job. And if we can't have those real, genuine, objective conversations, it makes it very difficult to make changes. Because artists will lie all the time. They'd be like, I'm getting $10,000 to perform at Champagne's Lounge, at the Piggly Wiggly. And I'm like, child, no you're not, child. But the point is, they have to be honest about it. I wish more artists would get together and say, hey, this is what is being paid here so that other artists can know. Like maybe don't quit your day job before prematurely pursuing this endeavor, unless you have some sort of a financial support system behind you. If you don't, please work a job until your passion exceeds the income associated with your passion, and then you can pursue it full time. Doing it prematurely just makes you more vulnerable to mental health issues associated with not being able to afford to pay your bills, physical ailments because you'll probably start to starve, legal issues because maybe you can't pay certain things, and now, you might have some tickets on your car might be booted, you might try to jump the turnstile at the subway because you couldn't afford to get the swipes because the money is funny. And, and then you get locked up, and now you don't have legal aid, and now you can't get a job. I mean, it's a cycle that does directly impact those that are the most vulnerable. So be honest with yourself. If you cannot make enough money to cover your monthly and annual expenses primarily off of your talent, then perhaps you may want to consider some alternatives until you get to that point. I have spoken. Any final remarks? Any thoughts, advice of what you think? Any advice you have for artists? Go ahead, artists.
I would just say, learn the business. It's artists that came before us were not educated on the business. That's why a lot of them, that's why you have Unsung. That's why you have the VH1 series, the biopics and stuff. They didn't learn that stuff, and they all signed bad deals. You can look at any episode and you'll find that. But Google is your friend, and it's no need for no one at this point to not know the business that they're getting into. And you have to be a project manager. You have to manage every aspect of your business and know what's going on and know the correct processes and procedures for getting things done in the industry, because that will take you a long way.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Can you add something?
I would add to that is find out where the resources are, right? I mean, I'm with Philadelphia Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts, but a lot of people don't know that almost every major city in the United States has a Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts organization there. And so there are people out there to whom you can turn, and there are arts service organizations within Philadelphia, whether it's the Cultural Alliance or Philly Culture United, and many others, the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. Those of us who are in the arts service field know each other. So if you get to one of us, we can help you get to the right person or organization. So I would say, don't be shy. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because there are resources out there available for you, many of which are free.
Yes.
I would just say, don't be afraid to create a space for your art. We create dependency. We're waiting for somebody else to make the call. Think about, we didn't have all this access to streaming and media and social media and videos. You can create, Justin Bieber, for crying out loud, you create a space for you and create a space for your art. And my hope is that someone from this conversation today will go back and be that person that starts that collective and gets it going, so that artists can have a voice. And yes, there's tons of art associations, but you'll have to be on paper and be ready. Taxes, the IRS is not the boogeyman, guys. No. It took me a long time. This is my second go around at being independent. The first time I felt miserably because I wanted to stay under the table. I didn't want the IRS to know how much money I was making. Well, I come above board, and now I am living my best life, because when you hear those Republicans talking about, well, we're going to zero out so you don't pay any taxes on millions of dollars. It's the everyday suckers. We the ones paying 30% tax rate.
Can you tell them who the real welfare queens are?
Yeah, the real welfare queens is like the Waltons who own the Walmarts, the McDonald's, the big corporations, because anytime they pay less than fair wages and allow the employees to become dependent on social welfare systems, they are collecting the social welfare because they're reaping in the benefits and the employees stay on the system. So don't think like that. Think, oh, if I make myself an LLC, every costume, every score, sheet music, everything that I do becomes a tax deduction. You can tax deduct yourself to a point where your tax rate is nothing. I mean, it gets more when you're making a lot of money, but get an accountant, talk to somebody first. So make a space for your art. The IRS is not the boogeyman, and somebody in this room start a collaborative.
Thank you. And I'm going to add on to that. Yes, the IRS is not the boogeyman, but there are a lot of free support systems in Philadelphia. If you live in the city of Philadelphia, there is no reason why you should starve. They have a food pantry in almost every single neighborhood where they are giving away free food. A lot of it is organic every single week in every neighborhood. All you have to do is show up with the cart. So that's food. If you are an artist and you're not making a certain amount of money and it's documented, you can apply for food stamps. There is nothing wrong with getting food stamps, getting medical assistance. If you qualify, then you can pay a specific amount based on your income for medical assistance. Another thing, if you go on the Women's Coalition for Empowerment website, the WCE.org, there are a plethora. Go to the resource sections. There are so many resources that are free and readily available for you to support you. And what else? We actually have free sessions, free classes that we do that are virtually accessible called the Art Economic Empowerment Initiative. We're wrapping up cohort 1. Cohort 2 will be starting February of next year. Here's my QR link, and you can see how to sign up for free. And for every person that signs up, you either get an ebook or a physical copy of the Art Economic Empowerment Workbook for free. These are the free things that we are doing in the community to support creatives, because sometimes it is intimidating, but like you said, Ms. Leah, you have to validate the reality of what you're doing. You can't just say you're talented, but you have no portfolio, no website, you're not Googleable. If you're not Googleable, then you don't exist. You're just like a phantom of my imagination. And they will treat you most likely like the phantom of you have to cultivate your audience. You have to be able to articulate analytics and data. And I can actually bring out this many people to this show, and I have this legitimate following and not the following because a lot of people buy followers, and you can tell when you see the bots, because you can't say the other word anymore, the bots that are not aligned with true paying supporters of your craft, of your products, of your shows, and of your art. So just make sure that when you are establishing yourself, be genuine with what you actually have, what you can articulate, what can be validated, what is real, and be honest with the income that you require to live and not just survive, but thrive. So I'm hoping that this conversation, we're going to continue on more conversations. When you said there are artists that will get a job and they haven't rehearsed, a lot of times I would get a call. There'll be a corporate band that'll say, hey, Shekhinah, can you come out and perform for either a wedding, a reception of some sort of a corporate event? No rehearsal. They just send me the music. Now, I don't read music, but I have to know it. And if there are other members of the band, I have to just fall in line with harmony. I just have to know. And that's from years, me not being classically trained, me having virtually no theory experience, formally anyway. But just maybe about 15 years in the game and being in so many situations, it was like a survival tactic. Either I'm gonna come in, rehearse that music, know the songs before I get in, and they'll say, hey, what key you could sing it in? I don't even know my keys. I'm like, oh, just play however, because I have range. I'll just, So all of a sudden, we playing Ain't Nobody in the key of C or something. What key is it in, brother? What key is it in? E flat. Well, they playing it in Q for me, and they'll just have to play it. Or I get in situations where musicians will hire me for something and they can't transpose, and I have to just go along with it with no rehearsal, and I just have to do it because it's survival. It is an unfair advantage because I wish I could just look at sheet music and just go off the sheet music, but sometimes sheet music is wrong too. A lot of sheet music that's running around out here in these streets are inaccurate, and I know because I'm like, wait, I studied the music and it don't sound like it's being played, and some of these. That's why I don't prefer sheet music musicians all the time. It's a disadvantage that artists are faced with because maybe their parents felt like it wasn't a lucrative investment for post-secondary education.
Learn your craft.
Learn the business.
Learn how
Both.
much money you need every month.
Yeah.
How much money you want to make. Ken?
Yeah, I was going to say, and this also to the young lady who had the comment about folks not being able to read a basic contract. You know, it's never too late to ask. I was talking to a young man who's a dance artist, and he was telling me that he had an offer to perform at a festival, and he had to turn around the contract really quickly. Mm-hmm. So he said, I just went ahead and signed it. He said, so now it's too late. You know, I have to do the gig, and this is the terms of the contract. And I said, it's not too late. I said, bring the contract in, let's go over it, because now I can explain to you all the things that you signed that you never should have agreed to, so that next time you're going to be in a better place. And you know, sometimes I say to people, just bring me what you've signed, so that next time we can do better. And you know, there's always an opportunity to learn. And if folks think that it's helpful to have, you know, a lawyer just come out and talk to young people about, you know, contracts 101 for artists, mm-hmm. which I do often, I'm happy to do it. And I think
here we go.
Even, you know, we've been talking about doing clinics, yeah. right, where people can just bring in stuff relating to their arts business, and we just have several lawyers sit there and explain things. And I think, you know, we're willing to do that. This is about collective action. It's about collaboration. It's about these kinds of conversations needing to happen because we're all kind of doing our own thing in our own space, and we aren't necessarily always capable or maybe even willing sometimes to collaborate in ways that we can all uplift one another. But I think that there's plenty of opportunity, and there are plenty of smart and interested people out there.
I didn't want to let the sister's point go without addressing it because I was a young artist. I started when I was 12 years old. And I'll say this, I wasn't the best dancer, I wasn't the best singer, and I wasn't the best actress. But I honed in on all three of those crafts. And I don't read music, but I do know the solfege technique, and that's a great technique for singers who do not play an instrument. So I honed in on my crafts and I had an impeccable work ethic. Okay. So there were stronger dancers, stronger singers, stronger actresses, but I always got the gig because my reputation was that I was going to show up and I was going to work hard. And my art wasn't all that I am. You are a human being in all of your fullness. The art is something that you do. And so when that didn't work out, I turned my art into a full-time job. When I came home, I'll tell you a story. Orrin Evans is a jazz pianist. Mm-hmm. Orrin and I did our first tour when I was 17. I was 18. Orrin had to be like 16 or 17. I told him on that tour that he would become a star and I would probably do something for my community. And that is exactly what happened, because when I got off the plane, I was 18, I had did a year at Temple. I told my mother, Mom, that tour was great. They treat us really well in Europe. I'm going to New York. And my mom said, you start with the city of Philadelphia on Monday. Good luck. I became a recreation leader. And it was an opportunity for me to share my craft with thousands of dancers and actresses walking around Philadelphia who were in my performing arts program. So you can turn your art into whatever you want it to be. And that's what I mean when I say make a space for yourself in your art.
You know, it's no different than when the Catholic Church used to say Mass in Latin. Why did they do that? They didn't want people to understand because they wanted people to have to go to the priest, and the priest had to be the intermediary, right? Lawyers are the same. You know, and so we are taught to speak a certain language and to use 12 words where 2 would suffice, because there is the need to perpetuate our own existence. That's the God's honest truth. So, you know, when I also teach at Drexel University in their arts administration program, and I bring in sample contracts for the students, and we go over them, and I say, okay, what does this paragraph mean? And most of us can figure out what it means in 4 or 5 words. So why is there a whole paragraph, you know, about it? Part of it is this need for lawyers to preserve themselves. Part of it is practice and custom and just bad ingrained habits. You know, sometimes if you talk to a lot of the bigger venues, they have these form contracts, and the
Some
curator,
don't use contracts at all.
right? Okay, but the ones that have these big multi-page form contracts, a lot of the programming people themselves don't even understand the terms. They're just like, oh, I don't know. We've just been using it for years. It's just what we do. It's just what we inherited. It's just what my boss gave me or what our lawyer drafted for us. And it's just a load of nonsense, frankly. So, you know, a contract does not have to be that complicated. And artists, and I tell them this all the time, are perfectly capable writing their own contracts. Because all you need is date, time, place, how I'm going to get paid and when, and that's pretty much it. And the rest of it is a lot of nonsense.
I just want to say the arts is like 4.5% of the total economy. That's a $900 billion industry. The arts. So when someone is telling you that it's not profitable, it has no value, you shouldn't entertain the possibility, please demystify that with the research around it. And who's really making the most money of that $900 billion? Mostly not artists, mostly the institutions, the corporations, the entities that are in control. Some artists that have found out how the model works have best monetized it for themselves. Rihanna is not a billionaire off of her music. She's a billionaire off of her business concepts. You know, I'm not going to say the other artists who Adidas just dropped. But
I just wanted to, on a few questions from earlier. So when I said to the young artists to learn the business, and to a few people that had questions about, you know, language in terms of what you're reading, the standard, I guess, Bibles of the industry over the past 15 to 20 years have been Donald Passman's All You Need to Know About the Music Business and This Business of Music. Well, there's an artist from the 80s, and he passed away, so his book is a little bit dated, but I'm sure it's still the same information. His name is Kashif. Some of y'all might remember Kashif. Kashif wrote a book similar to that. It's called All You Better Know About the Music Industry. And the terms in the language are a little bit more simpler to understand. So that might be something you want to investigate for your library to, you know, help you read those books. But you definitely need those books in your library. And for all of the young artists that are in here, I know I said learn the business, and that was very quick, but I think you all should start forming your own companies now.
yes.
You should have an LLC for a record label. You should have a separate entertainment company, LLC, for touring and performances. You need to set up your company with ASCAP or BMI or CSAC for publishing. And you need to do that all by yourself. And, okay, you need to set up an entertainment company as a record label for you to put out your music. You need to set up a separate LLC entertainment company for touring and performances. So, case in point, somebody wants Ashley Scott to perform, they're not going to contract Ashley Scott, they're going to contract Flash Entertainment for the services of Ashley Scott to perform. I also have my own record label called Soulful Sounds International Records, so that's the music, that's the company that I used to distribute my own music. So, and also in terms of publishing, you have to register yourself as a songwriter. You register yourself with a performance rights organization like ASCAP or BMI. You need to have that all set up before you do any business with anyone. And be leery of people that don't have that stuff set up, because it can come back to kind of haunt you in the long run.
Yeah.
And also, if you have a manager, The manager works for you. You do not work for the manager.
Ooh, you stirring it up, Ashley. You stirring it
I'm
up. You stirring
sorry
it
if I got
up.
some people mad at me on that.
Not at all.
But I'm just saying,
so here for that.
The manager works for you.
Yeah, I work with people's managers.
And don't sign long-term deals with managers. Do it in 3-month increments.
And check the portfolio of the manager, because if they worked back, there was an individual who has a really, this person alleges that they might have served coffee for somebody at Def Jam. I don't know what they did. But the point is they presented themselves, Miss Alia, don't look at me like that. They presented themselves as some sort of A&R of Def Jam. They had a very bad wig. That was red flag number 1. Red flag number 2, they said that they were a part of a charitable organization and that they've made millions of dollars. I looked up the organization on GuideStar and on the IRS's website. They did not. The lie detector test determined they did not make that money. This person was selling dreams to a group of women, and this organization, was it NABFEM? NABFEM, yes, that was the organization. Yes, I've said it. And the person said that they worked directly with, was Russell Simmons? Russell Crowe? Who is that? Russell Simmons? Russell Simmons. But when I spoke, they said, Shekhinah, this is somebody you need to speak with. They work for Def Jam. So I just wanted to know who they served coffee for at Def Jam, because I'd never seen them. Their portfolio was not reflective of what they presented. They were not on Google as a Google legitimate search. I hope you're okay, brother. And I just needed to know what they were doing today, what they did within the last 5 years, what they did within the last 10 years, and it just wasn't giving legitimacy. So if we're going to talk about management, should have known. And I said, I'm never going to assume anything about somebody based off of face value, but the records and the portfolio has to speak louder than me. If you are somebody who is going to manage me, I need to know the roster of artists that you've popped and that you've been successful with within the last, within a really close time frame between now and then. And I need for your wig to be tagged. Yes and no. There are agencies that, but you are required to have kind of like your portfolio ready for the agencies. A lot of times back in the day, the agents would kind of like build you up. They kind of want you coming already prepared as a package deal, like your videos, your headshots, your portfolio, your media, and all of the sort. I will say this. I remember, may he rest in peace, Al Reed Sr. I remember he introduced me to the agency narrative. And initially, when he was doing his band, he said, yeah, we got to get an agent, so it's going to get all these gigs. And he had an agent, and then he was like, I'm actually like pushing to do more of the work, and the agent is now just getting the cut of the legwork that I just did. So he cut the agent out, and he was extremely persistent with just kind of cutting out the middleman and doing it themselves. I think it works for whatever works best for every person is individual, you know, whatever is ideally for you. Some artists just want to be artists. I think that's a lazy approach. I think that's a very unproductive approach. And like Ashley said earlier, you have to be your management. You gotta be ready to know everything. Yeah, the project manager. Yeah. You gotta manage your project and your brand and have someone to perhaps amplify that to other opportunities. And if you're not capable or willing or interested in doing that, then you know the Chitlin Hoagie and the Piggly Wiggly paying $5 is readily available for everybody to work.
In terms of having an agent, I would just say not to sign an exclusive agreement, because like I know, and there's different levels of agencies. There's corporate bands that just go out and get, you know, corporate dates or wedding gigs, if you will. You know, there's several here in the city, but there are, I mean, you don't have to be exclusive to that. There are still musicians that are out there doing their own thing. And so that agency is not required to get a cut of the money that you went out to get. Same thing as a recording artist. There are several recording artists that are signed to big agencies in New York or Philadelphia, et cetera, et cetera. But if they're getting gigs on their own, the agency's not going to get that cut. So it's about not signing exclusive agreements with said agent and or manager.
Yes, to that. Understand what it is that you are agreeing to, and be certain that the written agreement reflects exactly what your understanding is in that regard.
And sadly, oftentimes artists get excited. In some cases, there may be agreements where you get an advance, which is a lot of the 360 deal narratives. And I remember having an debate, conversation with Damon Bennett, who's right in the audience. Put your hand up, Mr. Damon Bennett. Touring musician who works with Mesa and a lot of plethora of other artists. Yes, and producer. Yes, he's producing your project?
Yes, producing my single. Yeah.
Producer, keyboardist, model. He's also a brand ambassador to Shades Incorporated. I remember we had a conversation about the 360 deal narrative, and he said artists would get excited, take the advance, get the amplification, but unfortunately, many of them would not understand that if the record label did not make the money that they were investing into that artist back, now you're in debt. And now you're trying to put out projects. Look at Meg Thee Stallion. She's like a #1 rapper right now out here. And she's like in a struggle with her record label because they had definitive terminology to suggest that her projects that she created was not technically the number of albums required to be concluded with her contract. Therefore, they've been dragging it out. And now, anytime she makes money, they make money. And they own her, essentially. And sometimes, like, why would an artist sign that? You know, even Eddie Levert just came out and said, well, we signed it because when you think of the poor people who see this opportunity and see the amplified visibility and notoriety, they can't do it on their own. And they're like hoping that, well, maybe I'll get rich enough and then eventually I'll walk away from them. But sometimes the contracts are exclusively benefiting to the label in a way that it holds you beholding to them. And it's like, well, why would someone sign something like that? And they're like, oh, just get a lawyer. Well, who has money when you're poor to get a lawyer? And who knows whether or not that, you know, the record label is also taking a potential loss on an investment that may not be ideal for them. So it's a two-edged sword.
Right. And so to the young people, I made a point earlier. So out of everything she just said, I think this is the plainest way to put it. My college professor told me, and I live to this day, and I told most of the crowd this earlier, a record contract is nothing but a credit card. What they put out, you will pay back. So do not go after a major record deal. Form your own LLC and have your own record label.
Yeah, I was going to say there's just so much wisdom there. Thank you for that that comment in particular about the nuance, and it made me think about another piece of advice that I would give is for the younger emerging artists is try to find a mentor. Surround yourself with good people. There are good people out there. There are people who are making it. There are people with integrity and wonderful experience who can help you. And don't be afraid to ask.
All right. And I think we are wrapping it up. I'd like to thank my esteemed, please give a hand to our panelists, Alia Sutton-Bey, Ashley Scott, Ken Metzner. I'd like to thank the band, Will Winborne, Derek Smith, Tim Ragsdale. I'd like to thank Petty Crocker for the food. And I will say, when you have the right people involved, you will always be where the money resides, because I believe in recycling dollars. We have a Chico system going on right now, the Shekhinah ecosystem. Y'all didn't know about it, but I'm sure there will be some deals that will be brokered here. And I'd like to thank the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts for supporting this initiative, Jason on videography, Styx on sound, Alex on house management, Erica and Cassandra. I'm Shekhinah B, and this was our first and hopefully not our last Creatives Chat.
I see the crystal raindrops fall, and the beauty of it all is when the sun comes shining through. to make those rainbows in my mind. When I think of you sometime, I wanna spend some time with you. Just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us. Hey, just the two of us. Building castles in the sky. Just the two of us, you and I. We look for love, no time for tears. Wasted water's all that is. It don't make no flowers grow. Good things might come to those who wait, not to those who wait too late. I wanna go for all we know. Hey, just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us. Hey, just the two of us. Building castles in the sky. Just the two of us, you and I.
Put your hand in the air when we going live. Oh, we are officially live. It's just about live. So right now I have to turn on my other voice.